Should we start now? Since it's 5:01.
Do you want to give it 2 minutes maybe? People are probably still joining.
Yeah, I'm done. We have a few minutes.
Trying to think there's anything we can do while we're waiting.
We can introduce ourselves briefly. So, hi guys, my name is Ali. I have a offer for medicine at Oxford that I firmed.
Nice.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Hi, I'm Alhasan. I also have an offer from Oxford for medicine, which I have also firmed. But I also received offers from Imperial, Bristol, and Newcastle. So
Sweet. Hey guys, my name's Liz. We'll do the vain part. So I've got an offer from Cambridge that I firmed, but I've also got offers from UCL, Bristol, and Exeter.
Liz, which college are you off?
Peterhouse. I would ask about the Oxford colleges, but I don't know anything about them.
Is that the one, Peterhouse one that did all the videos? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember watching those before my interviews. They were actually really useful. Did you get into
I don't know, actually, I didn't.
Oh.
This is such a shame because I wanted to see him.
It's quite cool. Ali, you got interviewed by the one who did the like one of the keyboard ones. I remember.
Yeah.
You had yours. I sent you, and I was like,
Did some YouTube videos as well. Yeah.
The Oxford colleges have more interesting names than I think the Cambridge ones do.
Yeah. Mine's a bit boring though, just St. Peter's. Like.
Yeah.
Right, so when it hits 5 past, am I just starting then? I suppose. All right.
Yeah, at 5:05.
Real. I might need to charge my laptop 20.
Be no one and then walks in. Brian Matcher. Sorry, this is entirely related.
How do you? Yeah. I was on it before it was a trend, guys. Don't worry. I've been on it last year. Because I had to quit energy drinks because they were making my heart go. It was weird. So I switched. It's much nicer. Releases caffeine a lot slower. I wonder what the science is behind that. Someone do that and write about it in your personal statement. There you go, guys.
Caffeine makes me sleepy, actually, which is entirely not useful. Yeah.
I've heard that's the thing with like ADHD and stuff, like stimulants.
Yeah.
Effect.
I went to GP because I was like fainting the first couple of times I had coffee. And they were like, "You're not allergic to it; it just makes you very tired." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll move on."
Right, should we start now since it's like 5? Hello everyone, I'm Rumi. I'll be in a webinar today, and for certificates, please stay until the end, and I'll be sharing the link to the feedback form right before we finish the webinar. Right, so we have Alhasan, we have Ali, and we have Liz, and today they'll be the speakers for today, and I hope you enjoy.
Right, so I guess I'm getting started then. So today we're looking at personal statements. Let me work how to present. Gosh, there we go. Okay, so with personal statements, there's some stuff about me there. Kind of a lot of stuff I already said before. Some details about my UCAT as well. Don't really know why I included that. But I have been completely state school educated. I went to one of the worst sixth forms in the country, which has not sent anyone for medicine in a few years, or Oxbridge. So a lot of the stuff, the reason I'm telling you this is because a lot of the stuff I had to do was off my own back. It was not stuff, it was all stuff I had to go away and find out for myself, which will hopefully make some of this more approachable for you. And it makes my approach seem like, I don't know what the words are I'm looking for, but I hope you get what my point is. Okay, so this is how my part of the session will run. Firstly, I'll talk you through my process of how I went from nothing to a full personal statement, which I submitted for UCATs. And then I will go through my own personal statement. So I will show you how I structured it in my original one, but then I have, when I go through it, will be a restructured version for the 3 questions and how I'd advise you approach that. And at the end, there'll be some time if you want to question me on anything in my personal statement, any advice for the personal statement as well. So, personally,
Sorry to interrupt you, but like you're not sharing the slideshow. You're sharing the other tab.
oh, is it not? Thank you. Let me work out what to do about that. If I stop sharing for a second.
Start presenting it and then press
Yeah.
share screen and then press the window.
Yeah, it's because I was doing window, I think, and not the whole screen. That should be fine now. Okay. See that now. So that was what the slides before were. So the first step I did when I wanted to start writing my personal statement, this was around, I did my UCAT at the start of August, so I took some weeks off and then I started looking at the end of August. So first thing I did was list everything I've done related to medicine and also unrelated that I feel like I could bring in. So work experience, and I've also put which question I'd recommend you talk about them. So work experience, hopefully you have some by now, but you can also, there's also online options, and also you have got time to try get a placement or anything at a GP, a hospital. But this doesn't have to be anything formal either. You can also do online things, and by no means, no university in this country will require it as well. And also work experience can also include like work you've done. So like I've got friends who worked at McDonald's and wrote about that in their personal statement. People I tutored and that was written about in my personal statement as well. And that also links to volunteering. Again, not mandatory, and the volunteering in my personal statement wasn't anything long term. It was just a few events and things which I did. Again, you mentioned that in the third question. Supercurriculars, that's all goes in the second question, and these include a lot of different things which extend beyond your current studies in science and how you'd like to approach medical sciences in the future. So this can include books, essay competitions, podcasts, lectures, and academic competitions as well. So things like your senior maths challenge, your biology Olympiad, chemistry Olympiad, I think that's a thing. However, with academic competitions like that, if they're not directly related to medicine, see if they can put in your reference, but I'll talk more about that later. Extracurriculars can go in question 3 as well, so that can include music, sport, any hobbies you might have. I have a friend who applied for dentistry who wrote about knitting in hers and like cooking and stuff as well. So there's a lot of different things you can put. And also with extracurriculars as well. For other courses, you will be told, do not write about extracurriculars. And that is true because other subjects are fully academic. But what I would like you to understand about medicine, from my point of view and from what I've been told by people at different universities, is medicine is a vocation. You are not just applying for a degree, you are not just applying to study something, you are also technically applying for a job. You are applying to be a doctor or a dentist. So that is also something to bear in mind. And if those extracurriculars have given you skills which can apply to a vocation, they are valuable to write about and talk about in your interviews. I think at like 4 of my stations at my Newcastle interview, I just talked about music and drama. It's easy to talk about if you have it. And also your own lived experiences. So, for example, if there was someone in your family who suffered from an illness or anything along those lines, those can be talked about in question 1. So that's why your motivation for medicine started. But also you can talk about those in question 3 if you observed any healthcare professional or any caregiver, or you were a caregiver in that situation. And as I said at the end, you can group these by questions. So there's my list as well, groups by this. And I also grouped it in 2 different ways. Oh, can I zoom in? Yes, I can. So I kind of coded it in a way which are 2, I differentiated all my experiences in 2 ways. So insight, so things where I gained an understanding of medicine. So this is things like reading books, work experience where I was shadowing someone, where you're not actually actively doing anything. You are just watching someone or seeing someone do something or reading about someone doing something. You're not actively using your skill set to help someone else. And then I ticked some things as well, which are things I've done, which is where I've demonstrated my own skill set, and then I can relate this back to medicine. And you can see here as well, I also coded it with a P and an R to say which stuff I wanted to be put in my reference and which stuff I wanted to be put in my personal statement. Now, your reference is a great tool because the personal statement is limited in characters. You want to talk about the best things in that because that is what the universities will pay more attention to. So if it's not very related to medicine, go for putting it in your reference. And there's also some things like the Brighton and Sussex online work experience. I didn't finish it, so I was like, I won't put in my personal statement, but if my teacher wants to mention it in my reference, they can. So that's what you can do. Okay, next up, what you want to do, I mentioned skills a lot already, but these things, you want to match them to relevant skills required for a doctor. And the Medical Schools Council provides a list of all these skills. And also this year, hopefully I can open this, they've provided a really detailed document with where these skills will be used as a healthcare professional and as a medical student. So that'll be linked. I can provide the link after the session, which you can open. And it also explains why you will use these skills, which is really useful for when you're reflecting on your own experiences and things you've seen. So that was the next step of what I did. Slideshow that again. And I did this as a mind map. I would write out the skill and like I also started thinking about where I'd want to write that in my personal statement and linking experiences and reflecting. And then once you've done that, it becomes very easy to plan. So I would recommend, some people might not, writing a bit more of a plan out. Sorry, I live next to a hospital. You can write a plan like this. I did not stick to it. Like I didn't do a paragraph about extracurriculars by the end of it. I devoted more time and I also changed the order. But the general consensus was I stuck to it a bit. And it can also help you plan like how you're going to pivot between paragraphs. So you've got a nice holistic piece of work that flows and is easy to read for your admissions tutors. However, when you're doing this as well, you want to start shortlisting. So I've given you some potential questions you can think about when you're looking at your own experiences so that you can start shortlisting and thinking, what would I like to write? What would I not like to write? So how many different skills and attributes does this experience demonstrate? So for example, if it only shows like teamwork, is that very valuable to write a whole paragraph about? You might want to pick something where you can show teamwork, empathy, communication, multiple things at once. And does this link to anything else? Especially for Oxbridge, this is very important because for any course at Oxbridge, they want to see when you are learning stuff, you are linking it to other areas. So when you see something in hospital, you link it to something you read. And then because you were interested in what you read, you went and read something else, or you went and watched this lecture. So they want to see a process of discovering and diving into your learning. Would you be confident discussing it in length at an interview setting? This is more important for Oxbridge than other universities because it depends on the college, but I got asked about things in my personal statement. So if it is something you are very interested in and you will, after you write your personal statement, go away and learn more as well, so you can expand on it in your interviews, do it. If it's something you're not as confident on, so for me, I'll bring this up again, the Brighton and Sussex work experience, I didn't get much out of it. We'll go the right way. Yeah. I didn't include it because I couldn't talk about it much. I didn't get much out of it. If you do though, if you do it and you get stuff out of it, brilliant. So definitely go away and do it. Just wasn't my thing. Do I have a good balance of things that I have observed versus things I've done? You want that balance. You can't just talk about things you've done. You need to make sure you're also talking about how you understand medicine. However, I often find it's the other way around. People talk a lot about their work experience and how they watched this doctor do this and they did that. Okay, but what have you done? They want to know about you. They want to know, they don't care as much about the specific things you've seen. Oh, I shadowed a nephrologist doing this surgery and he made this incision here. Who cares? Oh, well. What have you done to show that you can do that in a few years? And will this / can this be mentioned in my academic reference instead, which I have mentioned? So step 4, writing it. This was the worst for me. I hated this bit. I just could not get it started. I was like, this is awful. I sound like an egotistical maniac. This is dreadful. So I crashed out many times. However, my advice to you is start, get a draft on paper. My first draft, I deleted it. I hated it. And I rewrote it again. And your first draft should be very long. Make a really long-winded, waffly personal statement. Just get everything you want down onto paper because just the practice of that will help you write better. And then I think I did about 3 drafts in total. I was someone who did a draft and got loads of feedback before I did another. And this feedback wasn't just from people, which I'll get onto in a second. I also used ChatGPT and AI as a tool. Do not use it to write your personal statement. This is not what I'm telling you at all. However, it was good for quick feedback. Like if I rewrote a paragraph and I can't wait like a day for a teacher to look over it. I just want quick feedback, put it in. It won't be great feedback, but it's good enough. And also can identify sentences which are poorly worded. And when I had this really long-winded personal statement, I would tell it, remove whole sentences, do not change anything I've written, just remove whole sentences. And that was pretty useful as well for cutting out the waffly bits. And again, gain feedback from as many people as possible. Medicine is beautiful because it's a multidisciplinary field. You talk about, you have to use a large skill set. You are talking to people, but also you get to gain a massive education in the medical sciences. So as you can see, I wasn't friends with anyone who was applying for medicine, so I asked my friends applying for art, drama, English, history, film studies, and also some people I knew who were applying for scientific disciplines to read mine. And I asked pretty much all my teachers. And this was very useful to hear loads of different points of views, what people thought of it, like the initial reaction, like if I was sat with them and they were reading it, what the first thing came to their face was. If it was like disgust, I'd be like, okay, let's change that. But if they were like, oh, that's really nice, and you, okay, I should probably keep that. However, remember any feedback you get, whether that is from teachers, friends, tutors, like people like any of us on this call, it is advice. You do not have to follow it. Some people gave me advice, especially from my school. Some schools are very pushy with what they want you to write. You do not have to follow it. It is a personal statement. You submit your UCAT, you can choose what you write, and it's in the name. No one can force you to change it that much. So, after all that, I got a personal statement. So I will go through it very briefly now, and just kind of summarize the things that I wrote. So, before 2026, this is how I had it structured. So I had an introduction, I had a first paragraph where I discussed my work experience and also some tutoring and volunteering I did. And I centered it around communication and empathy and working under pressure. And then the middle of my personal statement had a focus on the things in medical sciences. And then the last paragraph was about volunteering, and it's been cut off by this graph, which I included for some reason, about volunteering and more things about empathy and compassion. And then I concluded it at the end. And when I restructured it, I was quite fortunate. I could just kind of move the paragraphs around. So my question was my introduction and conclusion, as these were just kind of my motivations for medicine, my reason why I want to study it. My question 2 was my medical sciences ones. And my paragraph 1 and 4 was all the work experience and tutoring things. Now, as you can see, for question 2, I wrote a little bit over 1,000. The structure I'd recommend is 1,000, 1,000, and 2,000. However, I put more in question 2 as I was applying for Oxbridge. They want more science. I'd also say maybe Imperial and UCL as well will want a bit more sciencey content. So make sure that question 2 is buffed out a bit if you are. However, if you're just looking at universities, especially the more clinical ones like Newcastle and Manchester, Sunderland, include more in question 3. They'll want to read the clinical stuff if they do end up reading your personal statement. So, question 1, this is what I wrote. So I would, for question 1, again, it is why do you want to study this course or subject? But I struggled to do this. I was thinking, how could you do this without actually using an experience to illustrate it? So I decided, you know what, I'll leave this little bit about my work experience in, and then it makes it much easier for me to explain, and it feels a bit more justified. So this was my original introduction, and then this is my conclusion. I'm going to go through this really quickly because, again, you can see I'm running out of time slightly, so I want to, if there's anything you want me to clarify in it, we can go through it, and also this will be sent to you after for you to read. And again, think about your own personal reasons for medicine. So I've already mentioned, I love how multidisciplinary medicine is. I'm someone who's very indecisive, and I love how it's an open field where you can use lots of different skills. So I made sure you illustrate that in your question 1. Again, it's a personal statement. Think about your own reasons for wanting to study it, and then go on to be a doctor as well. So question 2, this was all my sciencey stuff. So deeply scientific things, like you can see I went into a little bit of detail, but then I explained why this was fascinating to me, and linking it back to medicine and being a doctor. So revolutionizing patient outcomes, and also how medicine's constantly changing as well. And also linking it to work experience at the start as well, to show I know more for the other universities as well, but also for Oxbridge, that even if I don't go into medical science research, I understand why I am going to go and study this stuff for the next 6 years, and why I will be learning science for a few years as well. And then the last question, all my things about work experience. So shadowing, I only briefly mentioned it at the start before I started talking about my own experiences. So this is kind of what I meant earlier. Make sure you're discussing things you've done rather than just things you've observed. And make sure you're using the keywords mentioned in the Medical Schools Council's document. They love seeing these words. It shows you have an understanding and that insight into medicine. And another piece of advice as well, if you've written about specific things related to NHS or medical sciences, make sure you know what all of it means. Make sure you, especially if you are applying for Oxbridge, annotate your personal statement before your interview. Make sure you know what every single word means and you could elaborate on anything you've written. I was asked about the respect form, which I'm not sure if I said in my interview, I'm not sure if it's across the whole NHS, but it's definitely in my trust and what it is. So that's my personal statement, and that is me done. I hope that was useful. I gave a lot of advice. If you'd like clarification on anything, please put the questions in the chat now. And do I have until past, Ruby, to answer any questions?
Yeah, I believe so.
Past. All right. If we're done earlier, though, that's fine, and then Liz can get started as well, because I know she needs to head off at 6. So yeah, any questions, please put them in the chat. You can raise your hand and say them as well. That'd be brilliant. So yeah, go for it. Up until 5:40. Oh, I went through that very quickly then. So I've got time to elaborate on stuff.
It's like a webinar.
So any questions? Would be better though. Hopefully you have questions because I won't be sticking.
I'm going to interrupt you. Sorry, we had a question earlier that went unanswered. Someone said for question 2, do you need to talk about your A levels? I think it was answered in chat by Ali, but you might want to say it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I completely agree with what Ali said. Don't fall into trap. It is more useful to talk about things you've done. Even Olympiads, I'd recommend against if it was organised by your school. And you didn't do much. Like I did biology Olympiad. I went in, sat the exam. I didn't even know what it was. I was just forced to do it. But no, A levels will definitely be talked about in your academic reference. If you want them to mention specific things, like in my biology and chemistry one, I was like, can you explain how this will link to, for example, at Oxbridge, you do more labs and stuff, how my lab skills have developed. Okay. For Oxford, I heard they don't care much about extracurricular. How do I factor that in whilst also writing about enough extracurricular for other uni? Oxford, it is for other academic degrees. They don't care about extracurricular. Medicine, as I said, it's vocational. So you can talk about it if you'd like. Obviously, don't go at length about it, but relate it back to medicine. Everything in your personal statement should relate back to medicine. Sorry, can you go over what you said about UCL/Imperial personal statements and what to include for them? Thank you. So everything I've mentioned, it is pretty much the same. Similar to Oxbridge, but if you don't have as much sciencey stuff to include, that's also fine. Imperial and UCL, I can't speak. Liz, did you say you applied UCL?
Yeah, I did.
Do they look at your personal statement?
I believe they read it post-interview. I'm not really sure about pre.
Because I know, Ali, you can back me up on this. I don't think Imperial read it much either. Hello? Being aired. Okay, so it's just kind of similar stuff. UCL and Imperial, whilst they are more academic universities as well, it's just they are also very similar to other medical schools. How old should the extracurricular need to be relevant? I won this competition in year 10. Is it relevant enough? Well, it depends what it was, because like in my personal statement, I wrote about I voluntarily performed for residents in care homes. This was when I was in year 10, I think. So I wrote about it because it was a good experience, but it was a while ago. You don't need to tell them when it was. If it's a big competition, maybe you will. So have a think about that. Can you please go over question 2 in more detail? I don't know how to start. That is absolutely fine. So I will go back to this slide, and these are the kind of things you want to include in question 2. So books, essay competitions, podcast lectures, academic competitions. So with things like this, look at the things you've done in biology and chemistry and what interests you, and things you know about medicine that interest you. So for me, that was things like HIV and immunology. I was interested in neuroscience, so I read up on those and I signed up for things related to those, and that will give you a starting point. And when you're doing these things, think about, right, think actively, what am I doing, or what have I done? How does that relate back to medicine? And you can write about it. But yeah. Do you have to talk about extracurricular? No. It is just another way to demonstrate your skill set. If you can do that through volunteering or work experience as well, that is more than fine. And I got some work experience in year 10. Would it be considered as relevant? Again, this is something where I'm like, if it's good enough that you can talk about it in an interview and you remember enough of it, sure. But also don't worry too much if you can't. How do you write about your motivation to be a doctor/dentist without writing about common cliches? So this is where getting feedback and writing multiple drafts will help, because you are likely to fall into them, and also reading a lot of different personal statements and kind of just learning what the common cliches are was very useful. So, and also just thinking about your own personal reasons for wanting to do medicine. So like, whilst like the cliches like, oh, I want to help people, that is true. Everyone who does medicine wants to help people. It is cliche, but also it is true. You just need to elaborate more and give your own personal reasons. Is shadowing really important when going into medicine? No, I know loads of people who applied and did not do any at all. Again, you do not need any specific type of work experience or amount of work experience to get into medical school. You can do anything. Like, how can we start off question 1, especially if you don't have work experience yet? I can answer later, don't worry. I think I'll leave that one to Liz because I've answered that briefly with the last one. I have an idea about linking an exam question in A-level bio to an online course I did. Would that be smart or too odd or cliche? Oh, that's quite interesting. I'm not sure. Might be a bit odd. You could maybe a specific exam question you would state, but like after my studies in A-level biology, I was interested in this and I went and did this online course. They'd love to see stuff like that. I still haven't managed to get any hospital-based work experience, but I've done line work experience, shadowed a GP surgery, and worked in 2 jobs. That is more than enough. That is more than enough. I only did 1 shadowing. I shadowed at my local hospital for 5 days, and that was it. That was all the in-person work experience related to medicine that I had, other than the volunteering, but that was just events. Where are places to ask some more personal statements? Like, will the student room be a good place? Not gonna lie, I found quite a lot on TikTok, which was very useful. I have some saved, I can get those forwarded later. And also sessions like this are great. Thank you, Michelle. Medic Portal. I do remember seeing that as well. And they've also got university specific ones, I think. Yeah. Anything else? How much importance does Oxford place on the personal statement? So, for Oxford, they do not use it to shortlist for interview. For Oxford, it is just your UCAT and your GCSEs, and then that you're ranked. The top 300 odd people are selected, and then a few more are selected based on contextual factors. But during your interview, you might be asked about your personal statement, and they will read it when they are making decisions. However, it is not the most important part of your application by far, but it can be used as a good tool to show off things that you have done.
I think they also use it like along with contextual factors. After like the algorithm picks up the top 300 most ranked people, then they look at personal statements of the borderline people that didn't get an interview. So if you're not contextual and you're borderline and you have a really good personal statement, you could get an interview and have a chance at the place, like same chance as anyone else who got in an interview.
Do you know how King's used the personal statement? Ali, I know you didn't, but Liz, did you apply to King's?
I can't say I did, but I think they're similar to UCL in the respect that it's used quite a lot post-interviewing for deciding offers. Not so much sure about pre's.
Yeah, I'll see if we can get an answer back for you. Maybe after the session, I can speak to some admissions, like people who help with like medical admissions.
I'll look it up and I'll reply to the message.
Thank you. Should we link one skill to each experience activity, or should we talk about the same skill in different experiences? So I'd say just one skill for an experience might not be the best idea unless you're just going to mention that experience briefly. Like for example, when I mentioned a book, I just talked about quickly. The do no harm, I mentioned quickly just flexibility and compassion. But it's always best to link multiple skills. So like here I talked about creating a supportive environment, patient communication, and different things. So I'd say it comes with like what the experiences you're talking about and how you're going to write the paragraph. But I'd say having a paragraph centered around similar skills, so like you'd group empathy with communication and trust and working under pressure, but then you maybe group trust and teamwork and talking about the multidisciplinary team in a different paragraph. Do you write it in one document? Would I lead on from question 1 to question 2 as they are next to each other? No, they are completely separate paragraphs. They'll be read in isolation from each other. What are some keywords you should try to include? So that is all the skills listed here, and this document will also have some others, but there's also some other pretty good ones. Like a nice one you can always talk about is holistic, looking at the patient as a whole, the biopsychosocial approach, different things like that, which would be really useful to talk about. But however, if you're going to write about it, you need to know what it is. Like the biopsychosocial approach is very specific. You need to go away and learn what that is. However, it's not that important. The skills I'd say are so that they know what you're talking about, but other things not as important. Could this PowerPoint be shared with us via email afterwards? Sorry, I missed a bit of the presentation. It's all been recorded, so the recording can be shared. The PowerPoint, I will see if I can. No worries. How would I tweak my draft to make it more suitable for UCL? Should I add research projects I did and stuff like that? If so, what else should I do? That's all I'd advise do. Just add more sciencey content into your second question.
UCL is no different from any of the London or Oxbridges in the sense that please don't worry about having to tweak it so specifically for UCL because there is nothing that they do is different. If you have a real passion for science, put it in, but otherwise it does not make it a deciding factor in any way.
Yeah. How long is today's event? I think it's done at 6:30.
Yeah.
Any more question? Yeah.
If not, am I okay to take over?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Any last questions? How do you know what are the best things to include in your personal statement? Again, just reflect on your experiences, which ones you were the most genuinely, which ones were the most important to you when deciding to study medicine, and also think about these questions to think which ones would be the most valuable. Okay, I think we could leave it there, and it gives you like a minute to change over, and then you can start filming. Yes. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope that was useful. I am a very waffly person. I am sorry about that. So I hope it was. All right. Good luck, Liz and Ali. I think I'm gonna head off. Thank you, Rumi and Ruby, for organizing this. If any of you'd like my contact details, they can share it with you after. Right. I shall stop sharing and head off. Right.
Thank you, Alhasan. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, I'm just gonna run tech and see what happens. Okay, we're sharing entire screens, aren't we? Awesome. Can we see that? Anyone? Apparently I can't hear it.
Yes.
Or is it? Okay, cool.
No, we can see.
Awesome. Oh, loads of yeses. Hi, my name's Liz. I will run this part of the session, if that's okay, and talk about what works for me. A quick disclaimer, 2 things. 1, my slides are definitely not as charismatic as we've just seen, but it should do the job and hopefully my statement will make up for it. And 2, this, of course, is in no means a perfect statement. It's just what's worked for me, and I will talk about things. A couple of things, I have a different approach, as we've just seen. But other than that, because we've had a lot of advice, I will try and skip through to my statement specifically and try to answer some of the questions that we've gotten, if that works for everyone. If at any point anyone wants to stop me, feel free. Cool, let's slideshow it from here, actually. There we go. Cool. I don't want to talk too much about prep and process of writing. We've heard a lot of that, but we will run to mine and we can ask any questions specifically. I think a lot of the questions were targeted at how to write it as more of what to do beforehand. But I've only got 4 real points here to talk about in terms of where to begin. The listing experiences is a very, very common place to start, and I think it works for the most part. I'm someone who'd consider myself a little bit late to med in that sense, but I think I had a lot of random things going on in the list. And please don't put anything that you can't talk about. It sounds very, very obvious, but you will be surprised how many people fall into the trap of trying to sound impressive as opposed to being able to talk about things that they know works. And the second thing is, I think I had a little bit of a different approach to Alhasan. He did talk about a mind map, and you saw his version where he put the things that he did, and he linked it with certain, I suppose, skills that it links to in terms of what a doctor needs. My approach was a little bit different. For me, because I had such a wide ranging set of experiences, and someone asked, how do you pick the right ones? Yes, the questions give you a better structure this year. And we didn't have that the year I wrote it, but I would still say don't take the UCAS advice too literally. And I know Ojas has the same opinion here. For me, it's about thinking about integration. If you can link something that you've done with a skill, great. But if you can link it to something else you've done, it makes far more sense for me to put that in as opposed to the one, if you're an Olympic athlete, great. If it has nothing to do with anything else, maybe less great is the way I would take it. But if you can't do it, it's not worth name dropping. Save that stuff for your CV. For me, a personal statement is about what you do in med. But yeah, I think that's about as concise as I want to keep it. Moving on. Ooh, did not even know those transitions existed. But writing up drafts. About writing up drafts, I am a little bit notorious for leaving most things that I do very last minute. But this is one thing I'm very glad I did not do that for. Because I had friends, for example, who wrote about 17 drafts in 2 days, and I mean that very literally. But I think it is most effective. The first time you write your statement will never ever be a finished project unless you happen to be Shakespeare's son. But genuinely, the best bits of edits that you can change is when you get a fresh look of something. And my fourth point is about proofreading. This is interesting because we've just heard that his approach was that he had it proofread by a lot of people. For me, that does not work entirely, especially if you do have medic friends or your biology teacher. I would not have more than 3 people proofread it for content, unless you can confidently disagree with people. My reasoning for saying this is everyone will have a different opinion about your statement, but the more changes you make that you don't agree with, the less it will be a personal statement. Because yes, you will have people who have read loads of personal statements. You would have had your biology teacher who's maybe read a lot, or whatever teacher it is that you ask. At the end of the day, I think sometimes it just comes to having to make a choice about the way you word something or the way you put something, and it is okay. It is not the end of the world. I've rethought mine a million times. It's okay to just stick with your gut if you think that's right. And yeah, cool. Let's move on to the actual statement because we had less of that in the first half of the session. I don't want to sit here and read through all of it, but I'm hoping it's big enough so that everybody can read it. I'll talk about why I've highlighted the bits I've highlighted. The first thing for me is finding an opening statement. So, do I want to read this out? Yeah, sure. Just the first bit. The one sentence I quite like in mine, I'm not gloating myself, I promise, but I started with, no single experience alone nurtured my desire to study medicine. The evolving field of cutting-edge medical science combined with the art of compassion consistently stands out to me. Okay, the reason I've highlighted bits is your opening statement. Oh, hello. Why do we go back? Ooh, it doesn't want to let me go back. Let's try. Why does it not? Oh, there we go. Here we go. The whole point of the first statement is don't find a lot of things to talk about, but find maybe 2 words of things that it is the reason you are applying to medicine, essentially. And there are a couple ways, I think, after your personal statement, the next bit that you should essentially be talking about is either a personal experience or something that you've seen. Now, someone asked that they don't have a lot of in-hospital work experience, so they're not sure what to write about in question 1. That's fine. So the second paragraph that I've put here, in honesty, I would not write both the top and the bottom. For me, I didn't have an extremely long introduction just because of the fact we didn't have a 3-question structure. But the second paragraph is an example of how you would use a experience from a hospital. That's fine. In my first paragraph, I've talked about how I supported a friend in hospice with terminal lung cancer. That was my personal experience. So you don't have to do both. I wouldn't recommend doing both. Pick one that sticks out to you. Your third option is you can't necessarily pull on a personal experience, nor can you pull on a hospital work experience. It is okay to have a more general opinion of why it is that you wanted to do medicine in the first place. My third paragraph that I've put down here is my conclusion from my massive one, and it will seem a little bit less tied to the first 2 paragraphs, but essentially, I think the logic that I'm trying to put here is after you wrote the majority of your question 1, my conclusion was what tied up everything that I wanted to talk about, or at least what I wanted to leave them thinking about why I wanted to do med. For me, as it says, was observing how medicine impacts both children and elderly at the end of their life. I highlighted that because I talked about those things later. Yes, your questions are read in isolation. That is true. I'm not trying to contradict that. It does not mean that the questions are independent in terms of the themes that you're talking about. It is fine to have referenced a theme from another question. It's not like they'll only look at your one question, and if that's terrible, they're not reading the rest of it. That's not really the gist that we're going for. And if you do talk about hospital work experience, try to have it less in terms of the skills that it's shown and more about why. For me, that was my last sentence, which was reflection on this experience reinforced my ambition to pursue this career. Very simple, but it ties up everything that I was trying to say. And on the left, I've put sort of your screenshotable notes, if you like. I know the recording will be sent out, but if you want a quick guide. And I've put note a cyclical structure is nice. I'm so sorry if that brings back any English lit flashbacks. All I'm trying to say here is reference something at the start, something from the second question, something from the third question, tie it up in a nice meet, and you've got a tidy question one. Cool. I'll move on from question one because I feel like I hope everyone's had a chance to read it if that's what you want to do. And I think we're okay to move on to question two. Cool. Ooh, hello. There we go. How have your qualifications and studies helped you prepare for this course and subject? Now, interestingly, yes, this is what I would call the science paragraph. You will read mine and you will see I have referenced a little bit of work experience in there because, again, I did not write it out in a separate three. So for me, it was a little bit harder to separate out my statement into three questions because it was a little bit more integrated. But this is fine. I promise I have run it over people who know what they're doing and know what the new format is, and this works fine. So don't worry about, I don't think I'm wrong, essentially. So the UCAS website will literally quote you using formal education. Now, two approaches. One, please do not list your A levels and your grades. That's great, brilliant, unnecessary. But if that is something you feel like you have to rely on due to lack of experience or anything, fine, just find a clever way to do it. I know we were unsure about linking something, I think it was a biology exam question, and linking it to a course that you've done. I would say, in my humble opinion, I think that's fine, as long as you can emphasize the course that you're doing and what you learned from it, as opposed to this brilliant question that made you ponder the whole world and figure out all your philosophy. Cool. So for me, I talked about a UCL's lecture that I attended, a little bit of science with some jargon going on about the brain. And this is the bit where I would still count under formal education. So following this, I compiled an article as editor for my school journal on the role of immunotherapy enhancing my analytical skills. This is something I did at school, but it was not necessarily related to the A levels that I was doing. And I think that works. But equally, if you've written an essay that maybe you've had your biology teacher read, which is still something you have time to do, write an essay, get a teacher to read it. And all of a sudden, you've done something that's related to school. You know, it doesn't have to be very complicated. The second bit that I've talked about is some checkpoint inhibitor drugs, a bit of CRISPR. Again, more science that I'm genuinely interested in. I didn't just read a BBC article and called it a day and was like, great. People keep asking about how do I tailor it for UCL? How do I tailor it for Imperial? There is nothing shockingly great that they would like you to know other than just what are you interested in. They are research intensive uni, so that's great if you can put it in. If anyone is aiming for Oxbridge here, what I've put on the left is think about the style of degree you're applying to and have something to evidence the research you have done. Listening to a podcast is great, but two things, it's very easy to forget that. And two, what have you actually done that has taken initiative about it? If you've listened to a podcast, gone away and researched it and wrote an essay about it, that's very different to saying, I sat there while eating my breakfast and listened to a podcast that I now half remember but don't have a clue what's going on. That is far less effective than having something to evidence for it, having something physical that you can talk about and read the night before your interview if that's what you have to do. So that has then, I've shown a little bit more initiative about me wanting to contact someone who taught what I was interested in. And I quite like this, actually. So from that work experience, I learned how randomized control trials underpin evidence-based medicine through trials comparing surgery or physical therapy in children's tibia fractures. This encouraged me to study further maths, introducing statistics. Essentially, I don't have anything fancy to say about the fact that I saw a clinical trial. There is not much that I did because it was a little bit out of my depth. Your interviewers know when something is within your depth and when something is out. There is nothing I can do about a fancy clinical trial other than the fact it made me think about what they did. And for me, that was the fact I studied further maths and the fact I studied statistics. And I also went on to talk about the programming languages that I'm a little bit self-taught on. Again, you don't have to be a great level at it. If you have shown some interest and you can do it, that is fine. And that doesn't fall under the category of getting caught out and not being absolutely amazing at something you've done. Could I code you some fancy bits? No, but I think it works in terms of why I was doing what I was doing. And I think you would definitely make this question longer. I don't think it has to be an even split between the 3 questions, but it is nice to have a little bit of length to it. I would maybe talk about more science. Now, there is something I put in question 3. My question 3 also links a little bit to what I did at school. Something the UCAS website is very good at is they tell you to reference maybe school clubs you did, if you lead anything. I talk about being head girl later in question 3. For me, I couldn't separate that out and put it in question 2 because it was too linked to everything else, but this is what I would do. I would show you which bits I would pull and put back in question 2 because somebody asked where they would put the head girl stuff in. So you'll find that out in a minute. I'm not going to yap for much longer. I'm going to move on to question 3, I think, and we'll take questions for anything specific. Cool. What else have you done to prepare outside of education, and why was this useful? This is like your big, chunky, meaty part of your personal statement, in my opinion, because no one is going to look at it and think, oh, this doesn't fit the brief of the question, well, within reason, and therefore I would put this half a sentence in question 2. No one's going to look at it like that. If it is linked to work experience, if it is linked to your volunteering, do that and you'll be fine. So someone asked about keywords. I have gone through and highlighted, well, up to about halfway, some of the keywords. They don't necessarily have to be super fancy. Yes, you can go on and talk about the biopsychosocial model. You can talk a lot about more structures in the hospital, etc. But it doesn't have to be very fancy. It just has to show that you knew the essence of what you were talking about. So I talked about some experience in a geriatric ward. And okay, this I think is worth talking about. There will be some of you who have experiences a lot online, for example, but also some who have experiences, aka in year 10, right? So is that relevant, is the question. For me, I had experience in the geriatric ward, but I also had experience in healthcare experience in rural India. And the thing is, I saw the exact same thing at 2 places, where essentially the same sort of skills and the same kind of things. I could spend 2 paragraphs talking about that, but what I try to do here is I put contrasted with healthcare experience in rural India. It essentially meant, what have I learned that is similar and different between 2 experiences? This is if you have a long list that you want to talk about and you don't want to cut anything out, what is the same, what is different? For me, it was to appreciate ethical standards in the NHS and limited resources. And inspired, I formed my Silver Crest Award project on troponin monitors, etc., for waiting lists. That is something I've done at school, yes, but it came from the fact that I did work experience in the first place. And I think that is essentially why you want to do. If you have a long list, you can put that list in if you're pretty confident you know what you're talking about with things that are connected to more than one aspect of your experience. So I then go on to talk about teamwork skills and multidisciplinary teams. If you don't have a lot of experiences, talking about more than one skill is great. You can talk about, I don't know, the communication that you saw, but then you can also talk about the teamwork of the same experience if you need to. Medical schools understand that not everyone has the privilege of going and doing all these fancy things. I was quite late to the med game. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to do med for the longest time. So I had 1 or 2 experiences that I don't believe had much variety in them. So I tried to link more than one skill to it. So I talked about teamwork skills and multidisciplinary teams, etc. And then I go on about some school experience. As head girl, I collaborated to organize events for 200 students. Stick to the STAY framework. I have a feeling more of you will be more familiar with it than I am, or than I can remember off the top of my head. But it is one of the best ways to be able to analyze an experience you've done. So talk about the situation, the theme, analyze it, reflect on it. Very simple. And what have you done that is related? So I put building rapport with students to stage successful performances, mirrored the strengths of doctor-patient relationships in influencing clinical outcomes. Now that was a simple sentence, but something that I've analysed, and I was pretty confident I could link it back. You know, there are studies proving this, so I was quite happy talking about it. The next I put is volunteering at a hospice. I didn't have much to say about my volunteering, and I know volunteering is a very, very integral part of a lot of medical students who apply. For me, that wasn't necessarily the case because I didn't feel like I could talk loads at length about it that was different to any of my other experiences. For me, that turned out to be a small part of the end of my kind of work experience paragraph, if you will. And it was me talking about a doctor's emotional challenges. So in my first draft, I had linked the volunteering at a hospice to my personal experience, which was also at a hospice, which I thought was a nice link, but I think later I decided we didn't want to do that. just because it fits better with talking about my kind of formative experience, if you will. So that's that about volunteering. I don't have much else to say. Extracurriculars, a lot of questions about extracurriculars. So extracurriculars can go both ways. Do not be scared that you can't put any in because unis don't care about it, unis don't read about it. That isn't necessarily true. But also, it is okay to talk about it if you are not, well, you don't have very med orientated experiences. At the end of the day, for me, I really wanted to put some extracurriculars in there because it was part of who I was and what I did outside of medicine. And I did arguably more outside of medicine than I did in, because it wasn't a choice that I had always intended to go for. So for me, if you can tell me something that you did as an extracurricular and tell me what the point of doing that was, I think is a great shout to put in. If I was an Olympic athlete, but I also went fishing with my dad on a Saturday morning down at the coast, I would talk about the fishing if I could link that in, as opposed to being an Olympic athlete that I couldn't link in. You know, it's okay to have silly things that you put in there if you think that it is a big part of who you are. You know, you're a doctor, you're human, your job will be to connect with people. And it is okay to show whoever is reading this that this is part of who I am as well. So for me, that was talking about being a guest speaker on some conferences for gender inequality, and put a sentence in about why I mattered. For me, that was valuing the human touch and compassion that doctors offer. I hope my drive to address social barriers will help me empathize with patients of all backgrounds. Genuinely, that is one of the most honest sentences I have in my whole statement, and I mean that with full honesty. It is what I did, but it is why I did it. And I think that's a nice bit of an extracurricular to have. If you have loads of extracurriculars, put it in, but link it to medicine. And if you are someone, again, someone said, I won a competition back in year 10, is it relevant? Is there a reason for you having to put this in, would be my question. So if you're putting it in because you think it makes you sound great, you've won something, brill. But if you're putting it in because you can link it to med, or it has something to do with about you, sounds good to me as well. So I would do it that way. So for me, that was leading it to here we go. Leading a team to win a national RAF design competition. So for me, I talked about leadership early with Head Girl, which was a nice kind of link towards the end. And also because for me, for the longest time, maths was what I was pursuing. So I had a lot of this experience outside that I wasn't sure what to do until I linked in methodical thinking will provide transferable skills to my medical career. That simple phrase is what tells me that I have sort of linked in something to my medical career. And the last sentence I put is sort of the extracurriculars that I will mention in there because it is part of what I care about outside of medicine, and it shows you have a work-life balance and all that. But you honestly could have gone without. I talked about being a professional dancer, I talked about pursuing music, but essentially that it gave me a love of learning. And for me, that was going to be directed towards obtaining a medical degree. But this is your big meaty question, I think. Obviously, in my actual one, I had the conclusion that I put in question one, but essentially, that is what I've got to say in terms of specifics. I don't know how I'm doing for time. Does someone want to tell me?
I think it's okay. You can still 6.
Yeah. I'm going to jump into questions because I don't really want to yap and not have anything go into people's brains. So, okay. I'll go from the bottom. If I've taken part in religious debates, would you recommend including them and linking them to ethics, or should I not include them? The definition of religious debates could fall under a couple of categories, so you're going to have to be a bit more specific about what you mean. If you linked it more to the skill of you can hold a conversation with someone in a sensitive way, maybe link it to some work experience of a doctor talking, then yeah, sure, I don't see why that's an issue. If it's not for any particular medical reason, maybe if you want to talk about that you're part of debates often, I know a lot of people talk about debating as an extracurricular, which is great. Liz, you end at 6:10. Okay, cool. Oh, that's fine. I've got 15 minutes. What were your guys' UCAT scores? Sure, I got 3,180 V1. If that works, Ali will tell you his, I'm sure.
I got 2,950.
Nice.
It's okay.
Cool. How many characters per question that you need? Yeah, I would agree with Ali. Split it however you want. That's okay. I'm just going to run over the ones you have answered, by the way. I mean, no disrespect. Should you use very technical language in your personal statement? Ooh. Yeah, I'd agree. If you can define it, fine. If you know exactly what you're talking about, also fine. If you are putting it in, something I've learned, especially at my Cambridge interview, is they are very good at spotting holes in your personal statement, which I wasn't quite expecting. So they can tell when you use something in the wrong context or if you cannot back it up as well as you would like. Again, being caught out is one of the worst things you could do. Would you suggest to put hospital work experience in question 1 or 3? Okay. If you put hospital, I would suggest question 3 because most people have written it for a question 3 format. If you talk about hospital work experience, if you talk about it in a more broad experience as to why you wanted to do medicine, if it, I don't know, hit a certain emotion, if it made you feel like some sort of human connection, go on about that a little bit. Question 1 is fine. Question 3 is great if you want to talk about multidisciplinary teams, about skills, etc. Yeah, I can take questions about Cambridge. I mean, as much as one struggle I've had is condensing my personal statement for them. How do you suggest approaching this? Yeah, I had an extremely long personal statement as well. Scrutinize every paragraph separately, and quite often, if you are that over your characters, it means you have too many experiences that you cannot afford to add. If you are 3,000 over your character limit, often that means you need to start cutting out a couple of the things that you've done. I'm assuming that is why you are that many over characters. So I had to cut out another work experience. I cut out a fair bit of my extracurriculars that just went on for a while. Ask yourself, especially in question 1, is your paragraph getting across the point that you want to get across? It's very difficult. I think question 1 is the hardest. Very difficult to justify why you want to do medicine, and you have to be very careful you're not waffling. I would honestly say rewrite it. I would open a blank document and rewrite it, rewrite every paragraph separately, and have someone cut it out. That is your best bet. It's very difficult cutting down something that is 7,000 because you're going to have emotional connection to your 7,000 characters. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad someone has checked out how kings use a personal statement. I put in a Google search, but that works. Yeah. How's your experience applying to Cambridge Med? Ooh, anything specific about it? Are you after the interview? Are you after putting together a statement? I mean, just experience-wise, which part did you find the hardest? Ooh, what part did I find the hardest? I thought I had absolutely screwed over my interviews. First of all, I applied not thinking I wanted to apply. I decided, I think the week before the deadline of all your unis going in for application, I think my biology teacher was like, I would hit an application if I were you. And I said, sure, why not? And so coming off of that, I truly believed I'd bottled my interviews. Because they had picked up on topics I was comfortable about, asked a question on it, and moved on directly to topics that they knew I was uncomfortable about. So it was scary, but honestly, it's not as terrifying as everyone tells you it is, I think. It can be comfortable because you have to be grounded in the fact that you know stuff and they know you know stuff. I would say the hardest part is the interview. But it's more of the resilience part of getting the interview. Which part of the application process held the most weight? Oh, for anything about Cambridge, everyone knows the answer to that is an interview. Because Cambridge interviews such a large proportion of people that apply, it is undoubtedly the interview.
Liz, I have a question for you. That's sort of related to Cambridge. You know how you for Cambridge you get an extra personal statement they have to fill out when you apply. So like maybe that's relevant to personal statements.
Didn't fill it.
Just wait 1 more minute and then we can start again.
I've made you host, by the way. So can you hit record?
Yeah, thank you.
Recording in progress.
Okay. I will go back to Ali's question. He asked, so Cambridge does run a separate form in addition to your personal statement, which I had no clue about until I got sent it. And essentially, for me, I thought the Cambridge form was re-asking every part of my personal statement. So maybe I didn't understand. I don't think it's a huge deciding factor because I didn't fill out most of the boxes in terms of the bits where it re-asked my personal statement, which may or may not be why at an interview, one of my interviewers had my personal statement out printed and were sort of quizzing me on it, which was interesting. But I don't think the separate form is as important as much. I mean, I did do it, so and it seemed to have worked okay. But yeah, for interviews, I heard Oxford is as peculiar. Why is it a disadvantage? No. Quite interestingly, I had looked at a lot of those questions that claim that they're on the internet. I had no idea how the Oxford interviews work, but I can speak for Cambridge. No. For me, it was very much how you would run a science interview. They started with a problem. We talked about it a little bit. The first interview had a maths problem. The second was a bit more clinical. It had more biology in it. So no, not really the peculiar questions, far more mainstream. Here's a maths problem. How would you go about it? That was the sort of thing that came up. If a part of what drives me comes from seeing poverty or people dealing with depression, how do I talk about and crossing a line? Should I even bring it up? I don't think it's a definite no, you cannot bring it up. I think there are sensitive things that you can talk about, but you have to talk about why it motivates you specifically, not make it seem like you're talking about these people's experiences as much as it is why you want to contribute to it. But be careful about it. Is it okay to include activities in your personal statement that are already in teacher's reference? Yeah, of course. I had no control about what was written in my reference, which is interesting because in the first part of this webinar, we heard that you could ask for things written in your reference. Mine was none of that. You weren't allowed to control it, so I didn't know. I would include activities in your reference. That's okay, because what your teacher sees is very rarely what you know of it. So I would say do it. Can I talk a bit about my experience applying to UCL? Yes, of course. The UCL experience honestly was probably my favorite, I'll be perfectly honest. In terms of sending your application in, putting in your personal statement, it was identical to any other uni. There is nothing that differentiates them very particularly. I sent the personal statement with bits of science for Cambridge that I had intended to UCL. They didn't seem to have a thing. I cannot say I know whether they read mine at all. The only real bits that makes the experience to UCL unique is their interviews. I think they're held really nicely and it was the most friendly, but also I think is very good at assessing a wide range of skills from data analysis to your general interview skills about talking to people and gives you a lot of opportunity to show off what you've read. I would do some extra reading. It is the interview that my extra reading was the most important for, I think. And it's a nice feeling to be well prepped for UCL because they will test everything that you can. But they're lovely. Yeah, I really loved the UCL interview. But yeah. Is there anything major? Is that everything about Cambridge, about unis? Oh, I don't know if I missed some of the Cambridge questions on the previous webinar that shut out, so I apologize for that.
I can start now.
Yeah, I'm happy to hand over because it doesn't seem like there are any more questions. Thank you very much for having me. I'm sure Ali will impart his wisdom. But yeah, a bit round answering questions on the chat if anyone needs any more info. But yeah, have fun.
Okay, so I'll be talking mainly about the medicine, but obviously this applies to dentistry as well, a lot of this. So first of all, who am I? My name is Ali. I came from Egypt. I'm originally from Egypt. I only came here 5 years ago, and I live in the countryside. So it's very hard for me to. It was very hard for me to find like work experience, to find care homes, to find these type of things, because it's very secluded. Like we have a city center. It's got three schools and like a few shops and the Sainsbury's. So it was very hard for me to sort of find GP surgeries that are sort of able to accommodate me, being an inexperienced student and everything. So I had to rely on other things and I had to be able to sort of be more independent. Then other people might be at like London or Manchester or big cities like that. I did 4 A levels. I took maths, further maths, chemistry, and biology, and I did an EPQ, which was about gene editing. I have an offer from Keble College at Oxford, and I'll be starting in October hopefully. And I also had offers from Imperial, Kent and Medway, and Aston for medicine. Uh, and also I want to make sure that you guys sort of don't underestimate any opportunity. Don't like see, oh, this is just some essay competition and it's not really that like it's not that uh it's not that high level, it's not gonna get me anywhere. I think you should do it, even if you don't think it's like directly related to medicine. So for example, in the bottom corner here, this was a biology work experience that I did where we basically took bacteria cells that produced proteins that glow in under UV, and we just basically drew with them. And I drew a turtle. So that sort of experience on its own, it's not related to medicine whatsoever, but I can take that and talk about, for example, teamwork that I gained from it because I had uh like partners, lab partners. I can talk about sort of the communication skills I needed to speak to my teacher and so forth and my team members. So all that stuff you can link it back to medicine. So I put the slide here. So this is like a timeline of like what, the big things I need to do when you're applying to medicine, and I put it here because I want you guys to understand that personal statements, even though they're like at such a critical time of like year 12 summer, you have your UCAT to do, you have predicted grades you're worrying about, you have like a lot of things, you might be traveling. So even though it's a very condensed time, the year 12 summer, I want you guys to be reassured that personal statements are not that hard. They're only 4,000 characters, and that's basically nothing compared to like, for example, UCAT or interviews or A levels. So I want you guys to just relax and like take it as like a sort of place to stop and relax after your UCAT, after your predicted grades. Uh, so my personal advice: don't worry if you feel like you haven't done as much as your friends did. Some people did like crazy things, like, oh, I shadowed a neuroscientist or something like that. That doesn't, it's not really, name dropping won't really do anything. It's more about where you can reflect from it. So even if you did something that's like less extreme than that, if you reflected well from it and you showed how it, like what you gained, what skills you gained from that, then that's like very good. That's even better than just name dropping, actually. Secondly, if you guys feel like you have no like you have nothing at all, you can always start right now, right? So you still have a lot of time. Your application is due in October 14th or something like that, middle of October. So you have a lot of time. Use your connections, try to email surgeries, try to find emails of doctors. It's usually online. Email them. Obviously, don't hassle them, and don't like send out repeated emails. Don't spam them. Just send out an email saying, "Hello, I'm a sixth form student who's interested in applying to medicine. I was wondering if I could shadow you for a day." And then if they reply, like they're usually very friendly, and if they reply, then that's very good for you. And if they don't reply, you don't lose out on anything. So sort of putting yourself out there and seeing what lands, uh, I think that's a really good piece of advice. And then thirdly, whatever you do, list it down because you don't want to forget it, right? So like, for example, any sports, any clubs, any talks, activities. This talk today, for example, you can talk about. I listened to Oxbridge students, and then what you gain from that, right? So it's not just I did this and that's it. It's I did this, what I gained from that, what I developed. Fourthly, if you like after all that you still can't find anything, you can always do virtual stuff, and that's fine. You don't even have to say you did it virtually. You just say I was able to shadow a doctor perform this and that because you did see the doctor do this and that. It was just over screen instead of in real life. Uh, if you feel like that's lying, you can just add virtually before that. But it's you're still gaining the same skill set. You're still like sort of still able to reflect in the same way as someone who saw this stuff in person. So what is the point of personal statements? The point of personal statements is that uni wants to understand that you have insight into medicine, right? Because once you're in university doing medicine or dentistry, that's it. You're on the pathway to becoming a doctor or a dentist, right? because after uni you have 2 years of foundation training, then you have specialty training, and then you're a consultant. So that's like a set pathway for you. So they want you to understand what you're getting yourself into. Is it something that you're going to start 2 years and then drop out or fail, or is it something that you're going to be very passionate about and you're going to always try study because you're always sort of interested in it? They don't want you to pick something and then it turns out you're not interested in it, so then you end up failing, right? So that's the point with the sort of personal statement, to know that you understand what it's like to be a doctor. So I think that's why there's something my two other friends didn't like touch on, but you need to say not just the roles of being a doctor, but also the challenges of being a doctor. So make sure that you, when you say, for example, being a doctor has a huge workload, you also back it up with how you're suitable for that. So say, for example, I am someone who is keen to develop uh, my uh, I'm someone who's keen to develop my learning skills through this journey of lifelong learning, right? So always bring it up as a positive. So say something negative, but then say how you're able to adapt that into something that's positive for yourself. So this is some key terms. Feel free to screenshot it. So obviously these are for medicine. I don't know if you guys know what these four are. If anyone knows, you can put it on in the chat. So these are the four pillars of medical ethics. So sort of name dropping them will be like a slight sort of hint to the slight nod to the person reading your personal statement. And I put this next to rewarding so that you sort of understand that like having a large workload is a sort of the con, but then you can also look at it as this very rewarding medicine, like seeing a patient, for example, in dentistry, you're seeing a patient smile, in medicine, seeing a patient get back up and like feel healthy again. So sort of that, but then you need to also understand that it's a very hard life being a doctor or a dentist. Also for dentistry, another word that I would definitely put on here is dexterity, because that's sort of like one of the main things that you need to talk about for dentistry. Being able to, because dentistry is like very more practical heavy than medicine, like the course itself, the first 5 years or 6 years. You're doing a lot more with your hands, you're doing a lot more like sort of lab procedures, lab operations than in medicine. Uh, and if you guys want me to go back to this, just say in the chat, I can come back to it after. So the questions, these are three questions. That's like sort of what I think you guys should split up into all of these. But I know someone was asking about work experience. I would say work experience is your springboard, right? You always talk about work experience first, and then you say how that links to something else. So for example, in the first question, why do you want to do this course? Right? So you say work experience. I saw my doctor do this and that. This made me this touched me. This made me feel like uh I want to become a doctor because this and that, right? Uh so an example I put here is, did the doctor use hand gestures? Were they speaking maybe to a child or speaking to someone with mental disabilities or someone with neuroplasticity, something like that? Uh, so being them simplifying the medical jargon and talking simply to a child, for example, could have touched you in the way that you felt like they were being very empathetic, and that's something that you would like to do in the future. Don't spend too much time on details. So, for example, with the example of the child, don't say, "Oh, so he went to the child and then he comforted the mother first and then he talked to the child." Just say something simple like he used hand gestures or he used simpler words, right? And then focus more on how you can reflect from that. Uh, for the second question, I would say like never talk about your A levels as in like I do chemistry, biology, maths, because they can already see that in your application. What you'd want to do is talk about how school has prepared you for it's like sort of medicine, right? So I would say the best thing that most people have done is to talk about the required practicals they did in biology or chemistry, right? So say how making for example doing a titration in a group, that shows teamwork. Teamwork is required in medicine, and this that I saw this in my work experience. So it all links together, right? So work experience is not set into question one or question two only or question three only. It's something that you can springboard and use into all, like incorporate into all of your questions. Let me see the chat quickly. Oh, yeah, the recording should be available. I look, could I look volunteering hospital and what I observed shift into, so yeah, obviously you can always link anything you did in volunteering. That's what I'm trying to say. You can link volunteering into questions 1, 2, and 3. So use that as sort of the starting point of any point that you have to say, or the ending point of anything you have to say. So always link it back to medicine, or start by the medicine and then link it back to what you did, right? So for question 1, I would say I saw this at a hospital. That's why I want to be a doctor. For question 2, I'd say I learned this at school and I saw it being practiced at a hospital. That's why I want to be. That's why I think I'm prepared for being a doctor. Same thing for question 3. Uh, anyway, so this is my personal statement. Wait, let me see the chat. Question 2, could we add lectures we've been to? Yeah, obviously you can add anything that it doesn't have to be studies in school because it's not sort of identified in the question. It only says how have your qualifications and studies helped you. So if you did something, for example, stayed behind after school to hear someone talk that came from outside school, as long as something related to studies and it's not sort of like a project or anything, I think you can get away with mentioning it in question 2. So but I would say don't risk it, and I don't think it's a big deal if you talk about something that's like sort of complete. It's not gonna never gonna be completely irrelevant. Let's say for example you do music at school, you do another instrument at school, then you can get away with talking about that because I think instruments as well uh goes under the umbrella of qualifications if you have like a grade, for example grade 8 piano or something like that. So I think you can get away with mentioning some like certain stuff in different areas. So this is my personal statement. Obviously, it was done in paragraphs, but you have it in questions. So what I'm going to do is I want you guys to tell me what question you think each paragraph is at. So if you can have a quick read of it and sort of say what question you think this would go under had it been done in the sort of this year's format. So question 3, I don't think it would be in question 3 because sort of I talk about my dedication and compassion, like motivation. So like I'm saying my insight into medicine. So I know that, for example, being a doctor, uh there is it requires compassion, and then I talk about how that fed my motivation for impacting people's lives directly. So I would say it's in question 1. So it's sort of if you look at these keywords and try to incorporate like sort of these terms uh into your personal statement into, or like maybe alter them, find different synonyms, but sort of these keywords that sort of resemble this idea of this is why I want to do this thing. So this is my drive, my motivation, my like so this idea of me wanting to do medicine because of empathy or compassion or something like that. I feel like that's the strongest way of putting it. So this is the second paragraph. What do you guys think of this? Which question do you think this would fall under? Guys, I need to see the reading skills for VR. You need to read faster. Yeah, so if I said to you that, so yeah, I would say it's in question 3 because I talk about my work experience and then I use that to then say how I was able to develop my own empathy and compassion through volunteering, right? So sort of this is the thing I said about springboarding. So I talked about a situation I saw, and then I talked about how that I developed those skills that I saw through my volunteering. So another thing I want to mention out point out here is that I like got straight to the point. I could have rambled on about how old the patient was, or what the doctor was doing or stuff like that. But I just said a hard of hearing patient presented and the doctor shifted his tone and attitude. So I could have talked about what the patient was presenting with, like the day, what was the problem that the patient had, but I didn't mention that at all because it's not relevant to what I'm trying to say. My point was that the doctor was able to change his tone to adhere to the patient's needs, right? So don't mention stuff that's not needed. Sort of cut down on things that don't bring your point, don't benefit your point in any way. But yeah, I would say this is in question 3. So what question do you guys think this would fall under? It's very similar to the last one. I would say it's in 2. Because mainly because the last one was talking more about my volunteering, and I linked the volunteering to the work experience. But now I linked sort of an essay competition and another sort of competition that's in science, and then I linked that to the MDT meetings that I was able to shadow. So MDT just stands for multidisciplinary team meetings. This is a very commonly used acronym. I wouldn't recommend to use acronyms, but obviously multidisciplinary team is a very long word, and if you're doing medicine, then this is a very common word. I think dentistry as well, but it's like a very common word that they will know what it means. So I think you would get away with saying that. Uh, so what about this one, guys? What do you reckon? Which question this was for? On though? Oh, I actually put 2. I think mainly because uh this is talking about like another challenge, which is like sort of academic. So I put question 2 because I linked the another situation that I witnessed to like something that I've done in school. So that's but I reckon you can get away with putting this in part 3 or part 2, or like question 3 or question 2, because they're very similar. But also the word count for question 3 would have been really high had I put this in question 3. But I can understand why you would put it there. So this was my chunkiest paragraph, and it was about something that's outside of school that I wrote this dissertation on gene editing. So obviously I had my EPQ on gene editing, but then I took it further, and then I ended up publishing it. So that's something that you guys might be thinking of doing. I can give you guys some ideas and sort of some suggestions into what you could research if you are thinking about doing that. DM me on LinkedIn, or just send me a message on LinkedIn, or just send a message on the group chat, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. So for this one, I feel like this had to be like a bigger sort of chunk of my personal statement, especially because I'm applying to Cambridge. Sorry, Oxford. So if you're applying Oxbridge, then this is a very this is very important, right? Because they want to see that you're going beyond the specification and learning something on your own, and like getting to research, even if that's just like it doesn't have to be writing something. It can just be reading research, right? So you want to know that you're able to digest that sort of higher level content, and you're able to understand it. Uh, so if you're not applying Oxbridge, if you're just applying to other medical schools, then I don't think there's no need for you to do this. But obviously, if you feel like you still want to, then that's fine as well. This was the last paragraph, and it sort of tied everything up. So sort of like Liz had a similar paragraph, and I feel like this was in question 1, because I feel like this was also talking about my motivation to become a doctor. And that's how I talked about how uh, there's this there's this phrase lifelong learning, which is used to sort of say, oh, medicine has a really high workload and it's a really hard work-life balance. But then I twisted and turned it to say, oh, actually, I think I'm suitable for this, and I think that I will make a good candidate at being a doctor. So having split it up like this, uh, we can see that question 3 had the highest percentage, or like had the most characters, And then question one had more. I feel like having it split up where most all of them have more than 1,100 characters is probably the most ideal situation. And I feel like if you have question one, either question one or two, sorry, question one or three should have the most sort of characters if you're applying for medicine or dentistry. But if that's not the case, I don't think you should worry that much. As long as you make sure you link it to your work experience, and then or like say something, link it to your experience, or say talk about your experience and then link it to something else. So you want to keep doing that, right? You want to keep talking about your experience. But I'm obviously gonna recognize that there are some bad aspects to my personal statement, and I want you guys to like recognize that you're not gonna ever be able to make a perfect personal statement. There will always be things that anyone can critique about it, right? So I felt like I used I talked too much to set up different scenes, so I could have just gave one scene and talked about a little bit more detail, and then I wouldn't have to talk about different scenarios. But I talked about like um the person with the hard of hearing, and then I also talked about the renal ward, and I talked about the perioperative surgery. So that's three different situations, and that's more words that are being used up instead of me talking about myself. That's me setting up a situation. Uh, I also feel like I didn't flow very well from one paragraph to the next. So sort of my first paragraph talked about the vascular department and my work experience there, and then the second paragraph talked about something else, and then the third paragraph went back to talk about the vascular department work experience. So I felt like maybe that's a bit dodgy. Like obviously having reread it from like now, so like retrospectively, and also felt like the starting was a little bit cliche, but I don't think it was too like it was nothing bad. It's not like I've wanted to do medicine since I was 6, so it wasn't that bad, I guess. So thank you guys for listening. I've put a link to the personal statement. So there's one tab that has the personal statement just for like the thing I submitted, and then another tab has the personal statement split up into sections as we covered in the slides. So if you have any questions, guys, I'm happy to answer them. I think there was some questions up, so let me scroll up. What was my UCAT score? I got 2950. You guys have any other questions? Okay, wait, let me stop sharing. So how many tips and suggestions with UCAT? So for the UCAT, I think the best advice I can give you is understand every single question type and be able to confidently, if you have a question in the UCAT and you can solve it in like if you have as much time as you want, that's what you want to happen, right? So if you have a question, you're able to solve it if you're given infinite time. And then that means you understood the question. And then once you've understood the question, make sure that you can do it really quickly. So that's what you want to do. And you want to know which questions you take longer at, so that those are the ones you're going to skip, especially for DM, because DM has like different questions in different sections. So for example, logic puzzles, they take a long time. I'd always flag them, come back to them, because I'd rather run out of time on the last two logic puzzles than run out of time on the last 5 Venn diagrams, which are very easy to do. And that's sort of just looking at the section of the Venn diagram and just writing down the number, or like doing a bit of small calculations. Uh, so that's my tip. Obviously, there's not a UCAT webinar, so I can't go into more detail. How do you publish a paper? Just start writing it. Okay, if you start like writing it, start researching something that you're interested in. It started off for me. I just watched a YouTube video one time that was suggested to me, and then I ended up writing my EPQ about it. And then I felt like that I didn't take it like far enough, so then I just ended up writing a bit more. And I reached out to this person on LinkedIn who was a who ran the who ran a journal, and he was very happy to have me publish my work on a journal for a very small amount of money. Obviously, when you publish something in a journal, you need to pay the journal. I don't know if you guys know this, but even if you don't publish it, like if you do the research, you know about something, talk about your personal statement, they ask you in an interview and you answer very well, then they will know this person. He knows what he's doing. We can have him in our course. He'll be doing fine. He'll be cruising. So that's what you want to do. If you want I can have a list of sort of like other things that I was doing research on that I didn't end up writing anything about. So I just have a bunch of links and a bunch of stuff about different things that I'm very happy to share with you if you guys want to write about that. So, for example, I have a bunch of stuff about antibiotic resistance that you can read some articles on and then be like, oh, actually, I want to write about this. And then you can write about it. How do you prepare for UCAT? So talked about that already. Do you mentioned not to worry about interview and the fun. How did you prepare for them? Was there anything you read for them? So interviews, I felt like they were the most fun part to prepare for. So for example, UK, you had to sit down, you had to do 2 hours of mocks. But interview, you can just get your friend, just talk about something that the interviewer might ask you. So for example, talk about ethics or the pillars of ethics or something like that. Sort of more fun, more interactive than just sitting down and just doing UCAT. That's what I felt like at least. I know people that hated the sort of interview process because they didn't like talking to people. They didn't like, they were like more introverted. And then they sort of like were more hardworking in like on their own, more individual learners. If that's a thing. Uh, but I've personally found it like a lot more pleasant to sort of prepare for the interviews. For interviews, I would reckon like even if you just use ChatGPT, just ask me some interview questions. May take notes of like, okay, if they ask me this, I'll say this, that. I've done this work experience. I've mentioned it in my personal statement. You can re-mention stuff that you already put in your personal statement in the interview. So you can talk about if they ask you how have you shown teamwork. You could talk about personal statement. Uh, so things that you did, maybe even like for example, uh, practicals in chemistry or biology. So I felt like it was very nice, like a very nice process. I finished my PQ. Is there anything I could do with it further? So yeah, like Ruby said, you can submit it as a quest gold. You can expand on it, like publish it if you want. You can like if you felt like there was a subtopic within your APQ that you could have taken further, then you can go ahead take it further. So there's a lot of things that can be done. I feel like APQ is a very good like starting point into doing more in-depth research. How long was your interview and what were the questions like? So I actually had 4 interviews for Oxford. I'm assuming this is about Oxford. So I had 4 interviews for Oxford. Each interview is half an hour. So and you get every person gets an interview from 2 colleges, right? So you have one college that you applied for, and then another college that's randomly allocated to you. And if you apply with an open application, then you get 2 random colleges, and then the colleges rank you within themselves, but then they can also pull you. So if you did very well, but the other people that applied to that college did also like very well, but they did better than you get pulled and you can get into another college that you didn't apply for necessarily. So don't worry about which college to apply for, which one has a high success rate. Focus more on like if you're gonna apply and you're choosing colleges, focus more on like the life there, what's it close to, like so, that sort of stuff. In the interviews, they asked very science heavy questions. I felt like the stuff they were asking was very technical, but like whenever I said, okay, I didn't understand that part, could you repeat it? They repeated it in a different way. And then sort of, oh, he's trying to get me to talk about this thing that I learned in biology. And then I was more able to sort of answer the questions. Do you have any tips to understand things faster in UCAT VR? So I feel like for UCAT, and for the VR, sorry, some passages, especially the ones about economics and like finance and that, I really didn't like. So I would never understand them. If you have a trouble with a specific passage or like a specific topic, maybe watch some YouTube videos on it. Maybe ask a friend who does economics, for example. That's what I did. Or you can just learn more about that topic. If you have just a general problem with understanding in such a short time frame, I would say just do the questions untimed and do them in less time and less time and less time and less time until you're able to do them in the UCAT given time. So sort of train yourself to do that. Hopefully you have enough time to do that. It's still like sort of late July, so you still have August and maybe September if you booked it really late. Uh, where would the links to get your research be? That would be great. I can put it on the group chat after this ends. You guys can have a look at it. is it alright if I haven't done an EPQ and I've written an article for my school magazine? Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. An EPQ is just like that's just the title. Like it's not actually it doesn't change the fact that you've researched something and you've actually written about it and you've gained knowledge. But just make sure that whatever you write about, you understand very well because in a year's time, they're gonna ask you about that same stuff. So you need to make sure that you're actually okay, I'm very strong, I'm very confident in answering questions about gene editing and answering questions about uh antimicrobial resistance. So that sort of stuff. Do you do any graph analysis, image analysis? Uh, so yeah, there was a lot of sort of graph analysis and stuff. I think I can say that. If you want to know more about like Oxford interviews or like Cambridge interviews as well, they're pretty similar. Just look up on YouTube Oxbridge interviews and just find like watch all the videos. So Alhasan and Liz were talking about the Peterhouse uh videos, so those are very good as well. So it's a lecturer or like an actual admissions tutor with a medical student who's already in the college, and he's giving them a mock interview, and it's for you guys to be able to see it and be like, oh, how would I do if I was answering those questions? Would I have gotten them? Would I have taken a longer time to get them? And it's like sort of meant to be like that's the model. That's what you're meant to be doing because that's obviously already a medical student there. What was your interview like for Aston and Ken? So Ken was very different because Ken was the only in-person one I had. I felt like Ken was it was very fun actually. Like Ken has a group task, so you and everyone else that was interviewing in the circuit with you, you're gonna be like together on a team doing something, and so that was very different. And it was very different. Like it's just different than everything else because the other ones you just be on your own with the interviewer answering questions and you leave, right? But this one you actually talk to other people doing a task, so it was more fun. I think the Aston one it was online and they asked me pretty standard questions actually. So if you just prepare for a general medical school interview, that'll be fine for Aston. Is doing medical research important and something universities take a look at? So I'd say it's very important if you're doing Oxbridge, right? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be research, it just has to be that you're doing something super curricular. If you're not doing Oxbridge, then it's not that important, but it would it's not gonna hurt you. You're probably gonna have to learn that stuff anyway, so that's fine. Do you have any tips on long graph and table questions in the UCAT? Read the titles and the units and like everything that they give you on the edges of the graph before reading the actual numbers, because that was my biggest like I always, for example, like mess up the units and then end up messing up like 4 questions in a row. So make sure you read the bit at the start. They always give you a bit at the start and then a graph and then a bit at the bottom which is larger of like text. So make sure you read the little bit of text at the start to understand like what is this about. Don't skip it. Uh, yeah. So I know you're under a lot of time pressure. It's easier said than done, but like make sure you've read it uh and like understood it before you actually try the questions. I do research project essay competition. Is that enough for UCL? You think? Uh, it's not about like I did this. Is that enough? It's more about I did this. I was able to reflect on it. Is that enough? Right. So you need to reflect on how much you reflect is actually what actually matters. So if you did something and then you completely forgot it and you didn't learn anything from it, then obviously that's not enough. But if you did I'm not saying that you did that. I'm just saying if you did an essay competition and you learned something new from it, you learned about this topic in biology or this topic in chemistry or just that topic in like in medicine, and then you learn something new from it and you were able to reflect on it, then that is very good, and that's something that you definitely should mention. What if you like, oh, what if like you keep getting questions on time continuously in UCAT? I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, wrong. So if you keep getting them wrong on time, that means you have a problem with your understanding. So I would say make sure that you read if you're doing it, for example, on Medify, read the answers, the model answers that they have, and like make sure you understand why your answer is wrong for every question you get wrong. And you keep doing that until you get 1 question right, 2 questions right, 3 questions right, and so on and so on. Even if it's slow progress, any progress is good progress, okay? So I feel like you can humbles you really bad. It makes you see like, oh, I'm like not doing that well. But yeah, any progress is good progress. So we'll be ending now, and we'll take any questions on the group chat. And Rumi will be sending the form in the chat now.
Right. Please stay. Just like if you want a certificate, and also if you want to send us feedback. Hold on. Let me just. So this is the form, and complete it now because we won't be sending another batch. So we'll just be doing one batch. And don't share the link, please. Also, if you'd like to add us on LinkedIn and like make a post about us, these are our profiles. And if you want the link, I'll just post it now. Hold on. These are all the. These are all LinkedIn links. So if you want to add us or connect or anything, then this is the way. Thank you for attending today. I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, thank you. See you soon. Bye, everyone.
Recording stopped.
Guys, it was great to have you all.